The order said, "Liquidate." Major Alexander Solntsev read the word 3 times. It appeared twice on the page, twice in 3 paragraphs. Liquidate the column. Liquidate as precautionary measure. The word was typed in clean bureaucratic Russian on official SMERSH letterhead. Signed by Colonel Dmitry Kuznetsov, Chief of Counterintelligence for the Second Belarusian Front. Liquidate meant kill. It meant execute. It meant murder 2,143 German civilians without trial, mostly women and children. Solntsev folded the paper and looked at Captain Viktor Volkov standing across from him in the ruined farmhouse. Volkov was smiling. Actually smiling. "This is our opportunity, Major. Finally, a chance to make them pay for what they did." Volkov was 26 years old, party member since 1940, believer in Stalin and the Soviet cause. He had joined SMERSH 6 months after Solntsev. In those 6 months, Volkov had executed 19 people personally. He kept count. He was proud of the number. "What they did," Solntsev repeated quietly. "What they did to all of us, Major. To Leningrad, to Stalingrad, to every village they burned, every person they starved. This column is full of Germans, the same Germans who invaded our country, who killed our families. Now we have the authority to deliver justice. We should be grateful for this order." Solntsev looked at the order again. January 18th, 1945. 0400 hours. They were 15 kilometers west of Königsberg in East Prussia. The German army was collapsing. The Red Army was advancing west, faster than anyone had predicted. German civilians were fleeing ahead of the Soviet advance, hundreds of thousands of them, maybe millions, all heading toward the Baltic coast, toward the evacuation ports, toward ships that would take them west to safety. This column was just one of hundreds, 2,000 people moving slowly on frozen roads, and SMERSH had been given authority to stop them, to interrogate them, to liquidate them if necessary. "How many men do we have?" Solntsev asked. 32 under our direct command, and I have already requested infantry support from the 184th Rifle Division. 2 companies are moving into position now. They will be here within the hour." Solntsev looked up sharply. "You requested infantry support without consulting me." Volkov stopped smiling. "The order came from Colonel Kuznetsov, Major. It is our duty to execute it efficiently. 2,000 civilians require substantial force to contain and process. I made the logical decision. Cancel the request." Volkov stared at him. "Major, I do not understand." "Cancel the infantry request, Captain. We will handle this operation with our own personnel." "But, Major, that is insufficient force for an operation of this scale. If the civilians resist or attempt to scatter, we will not be able to contain them. We need the infantry companies to establish a proper perimeter and ensure no one escapes." Solntsev stood up and walked to the window. Snow was falling outside, heavy, wet snow that would make the roads even worse. He thought about the order. He thought about the column. 2,000 people, women and children. He thought about Leningrad. He had been a pediatrician before the war. Dr. Alexander Solntsev. He had treated children, saved children. Then September 1941 came, and the Germans surrounded Leningrad, and the siege began. 900 days. His wife and daughter were trapped inside. He was with his military medical unit outside the city. He tried everything to get back in. Every connection, every favor. Nothing worked. The city was sealed. His wife died in January 1942. Starvation. His daughter lasted until March. She was 4 years old. Her name was Katya. After that, the NKVD recruited him into SMERSH. They said his medical background would be useful for interrogations. They said his personal loss would ensure loyalty. They were right about the second part. In 20 months with SMERSH, Solntsev had investigated 47 cases of suspected treason, desertion, or collaboration. 38 ended in execution. 9 ended in the Gulag. Nobody walked away from a SMERSH investigation. Nobody except Solntsev. He had become exactly what the NKVD wanted: cold, efficient, ruthless, the ghost of SMERSH. That was what the soldiers called him. A man who showed no mercy because mercy had been taken from him. And now he had orders to execute 2,000 German civilians. Orders that would let him deliver the same justice the Germans had delivered to Leningrad. Eye for an eye, death for death. It was logical. It was fair. It was exactly what Volkov wanted. "Major," Volkov said quietly, "we are wasting time. The column is moving. If we delay much longer, they will reach the next checkpoint and fall under a different jurisdiction. This is our opportunity." Solntsev turned from the window. "Prepare the men. We move in 30 minutes. And, Captain, no infantry support? Is that clear?" Volkov hesitated. Then he nodded. "Yes, Major, as you command." He saluted and left the farmhouse. Solntsev waited until Volkov was gone. Then he pulled the order out again and read it a fourth time. The signature at the bottom was authentic. He recognized Kuznetsov's handwriting. The order was real. The authority was real. And in 30 minutes he would have to decide what to do with it. He walked to his field desk and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a small photograph, cracked and faded. His daughter Katya, taken in 1940, before the war, before the siege. She was smiling. She was holding a doll. She was 4 years old, and she was alive, and she had no idea what was coming. Solntsev put the photograph back in the drawer and closed it. Then he put on his coat and walked outside. At 05:30 hours, Solntsev and his 32 SMERSH personnel moved out in 4 captured German trucks. The trucks still had Wehrmacht markings on the sides. Nobody had bothered to paint over them. It made approaching German refugees easier. They thought Soviet trucks with German markings meant safe evacuation. They were usually wrong. The roads were sheets of ice. The trucks moved at 15 kilometers per hour. Solntsev sat in the lead truck next to his driver. Volkov sat in the back with 6 other SMERSH officers. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the engine and the crunch of snow under the tires. At 06:10 hours, they saw the column. It stretched for half a kilometer along the road. Thousands of people walking west in the pre-dawn darkness. They moved in clusters, families staying together. The adults carried bundles. Children walked beside their parents. Some were crying. Most were silent. "Pull across the road," Solntsev ordered. The driver turned the wheel and the truck slid sideways, blocking both lanes. The other 3 trucks did the same. A complete roadblock. The column stopped. People at the front saw the Soviet soldiers getting out of the trucks. They saw the weapons. They understood. Women started screaming. Some grabbed their children and tried to run into the fields beside the road. SMERSH soldiers fired warning shots into the air. The women stopped. Everyone in the column froze. They stood in the road and waited to see what would happen next. Solntsev walked to the front of the column. An old man was standing there, maybe 70 years old. He wore a thick wool coat and his hands were shaking. From cold or fear, Solntsev could not tell. "Your name?" "Franz Dietrich. I am the mayor of Gross Heidekrug. These are my people. We are evacuating to Pillau. We have done nothing wrong. We are civilians." "How many?" Dietrich pulled a paper from his coat with trembling hands. 2,143. I have counted every person. 1,762 women. 291 children under 12 years old. 90 men over 50 years old. No military personnel. No weapons. We only want to reach the evacuation ships. Solntsev took the paper. A handwritten list, names, ages, occupations. Dietrich had kept perfect records, records that would make liquidation easier. Everything documented, everything organized. Volkov appeared beside him. "Major, we should begin immediate interrogations. We can separate them into groups and process them systematically. I estimate 6 to 8 hours to complete the operation." Solntsev looked at the column. 2,000 faces watching him, waiting. Then he saw a woman near the front. She was maybe 35 years old. She had 2 children with her, a girl who looked about 7, a boy who looked about 4. 4 years old, the same age Katya had been. The boy was crying, quiet tears running down his face. He was cold and scared, and he did not understand what was happening, just like Katya had not understood when the food ran out in Leningrad, when the hunger started, when her mother stopped waking up. Solntsev looked at Volkov. "We will conduct field interrogations here. Form 3 processing lines. Women and children in the first line, elderly men in the second line, anyone between ages 16 and 50 in the third line. Move quickly. I want this completed in 2 hours." "Only 2 hours, Major? That is very little time for proper interrogation procedures." "It will be sufficient, Captain. Begin now." Volkov looked confused, but he nodded. "Yes, Major." He turned and started shouting orders to the other SMERSH personnel. The column was divided into 3 lines. SMERSH officers positioned themselves at the front of each line with clipboards and interrogation forms. They began asking questions. Name, village of origin, occupation, reason for evacuation. Have you aided German military forces? Are you concealing any military intelligence? Solntsev watched for 15 minutes. The interrogations were perfunctory. Quick questions, quick answers. The SMERSH officers were going through the motions, but they knew the truth. These were terrified civilians fleeing a war zone, not spies, not saboteurs, just people trying to survive. After 15 minutes, Volkov appeared again. "Major, these interrogations are revealing nothing of intelligence value. These are ordinary refugees, no military connections, no suspicious behavior. Under normal protocol, we would issue transit papers and allow them to proceed. However, our orders specifically authorize liquidation as a precautionary measure regardless of interrogation results. What are your instructions?" Solntsev pulled out the order and looked at it again. "Liquidate." 2 times, right there on the page. He thought about Katya. He thought about his wife. He thought about the 900 days of siege. He thought about every person who had died in Leningrad because the Germans had decided to starve them. Now he had the power to deliver the same fate. 2,000 Germans, women and children. He could give the order, and they would all be dead within an hour. It would be justice. It would be revenge. It would be what they deserved. Volkov was watching him carefully, waiting for the order. The other SMERSH personnel had stopped interrogating. They were waiting too. Everyone was waiting for Major Solntsev to decide. And then Solntsev saw the boy again, the 4-year-old boy crying in the cold. And he realized something. The boy had done nothing. The girl with him had done nothing. Most of the people in this column had done nothing except be born in the wrong country at the wrong time. Just like Katya had done nothing except be born in Leningrad when the Germans decided to surround it. Killing these people would not bring Katya back. It would not undo the siege. It would not fix anything. It would just create more dead children, more families destroyed, more people erased from the world. Solntsev folded the order and put it in his pocket. "Captain Volkov, cease all interrogations. Issue transit papers to every person in this column. They are authorized to proceed to Pillau immediately." Volkov stared at him. "Major, I do not understand. Our orders specifically state we are to liquidate suspected hostile civilians. These people are Germans fleeing into enemy territory. That makes them potential intelligence risks. We have clear authority to eliminate them. Our orders state we can liquidate them, Captain. Not that we must. I have conducted field assessment and determined these civilians pose no security threat. They will be allowed to proceed. But Major, this directly contradicts the spirit of Colonel Kuznetsov's directive. He will demand a full explanation. He will want to know why we failed to execute the order as intended. Then you may explain to him that I made the command decision based on operational assessment. If he has concerns, he can raise them with me directly." Volkov's face went white. "Major, with all respect, this is a serious mistake. These are Germans. They invaded our country. They killed our people. This is our chance to repay them for everything they have done, and you are throwing it away. Why? Because you feel sorry for them. No, Captain, because I am not them." Volkov opened his mouth to argue. Then he stopped. He looked at the column. He looked at Solntsev. Then he saluted. "Yes, Major, as you command." But Solntsev saw something in Volkov's eyes before he turned away. Something cold and calculating. Volkov was not accepting this decision. He was storing it, recording it, preparing to report it. The transit papers were issued. Every person in the column received a stamped document authorizing their passage through Soviet lines to the evacuation port at Pillau. The process took 90 minutes. At 0800 hours, the column began moving again. 2,143 people walking west. Still alive. Still hoping to survive. Solntsev watched them go. The woman with her 2 children passed by. The 4-year-old boy had stopped crying. He looked at Solntsev as he walked past. Their eyes met for just a second. Then the boy looked away and kept walking. When the last person passed, Solntsev ordered his men back into the trucks. They drove back to their temporary headquarters in silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody asked questions. Everyone understood that something significant had just happened, but nobody knew exactly what. Back at headquarters, Solntsev went to his office and closed the door. He sat at his desk and pulled out the order from Colonel Kuznetsov. "Liquidate." He read it one more time. Then he took out a match and burned it. He watched the paper curl and blacken and turn to ash. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." Volkov entered. He was holding a radio message for him. "Major, this just arrived from divisional headquarters. Colonel Kuznetsov is requesting immediate status report on our operation this morning. He wants to know how many hostiles were eliminated and what intelligence was gathered. He expects response within 2 hours." Solntsev took the form and read it. Then he looked at Volkov. "You will report that we intercepted a civilian refugee column of approximately 2,000 individuals. We conducted field interrogations per protocol. We determined the column consisted of non-hostile civilians with no military intelligence value. We issued transit authorization and allowed them to proceed. 0 hostiles eliminated." Volkov did not move. "Major, that report will raise immediate questions. Colonel Kuznetsov will want to know why we did not exercise our liquidation authority. He will want to know why 0 hostiles were eliminated from a column of 2,000 Germans. He will launch an investigation, and when he does, he will discover that you countermanded a direct order. Then let him investigate." Volkov stared at him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes, Major. I will transmit your report exactly as stated." He turned to leave. "Captain." Volkov stopped at the door and turned back. "If you have concerns about my command decisions, you are welcome to file them through proper channels. I will not stop you. But be very clear about what you are doing, because once you file that report, there is no taking it back. Do you understand?" Volkov met his eyes. "I understand perfectly, Major." He saluted and left. Solntsev sat alone in his office. He knew exactly what would happen next. Volkov would file a report. The report would reach Colonel Kuznetsov. Kuznetsov would order an investigation. The investigation would reveal that Solntsev had received direct authorization to liquidate German civilians and had refused to execute the order. That was insubordination. That was dereliction of duty. That was treason. The penalty for treason in SMERSH was execution. Solntsev opened his desk drawer and looked at the photograph of Katya one more time. She was smiling. She was holding her doll. She was 4 years old, and she was alive, and she had no idea that in 2 years she would be dead. Now another 4-year-old boy was alive, walking west toward Pillau, toward evacuation ships, toward survival. because Solntsev had made a choice. It was the right choice. He knew that, but it was also the choice that would cost him his life. He closed the drawer and stood up. Outside, he could hear Volkov talking to someone, the radio operator probably, filing his report, setting the wheels in motion. Solntsev had maybe 48 hours before the investigation began, maybe 72 if he was lucky. After that, SMERSH would come for him. And when SMERSH came for you, there was no escape. But those 2,000 people would be in Pillau by then, on ships heading west, away from the war, away from people like Volkov, away from people who thought liquidation was justice. Solntsev walked to the window and looked out at the snow. It was still falling, heavy and white and clean, covering everything, hiding everything. He wondered if the boy would remember him. Probably not. He was too young. He would forget the Soviet officer who let them pass. He would forget the moment his life was spared. That was fine. Solntsev did not need to be remembered. He just needed the boy to survive. Somewhere in the building a radio crackled to life. Volkov's voice, clear and precise, transmitting his report to divisional headquarters, reporting Major Alexander Solntsev's failure to execute a direct order. The countdown had begun. 48 hours. That was how long Solntsev had before Colonel Kuznetsov received Volkov's report and launched a formal investigation. 48 hours before SMERSH came for him. 48 hours to save 2,000 Germans a second time. The problem was simple. The refugee column had transit papers for one checkpoint. But between their current position and Pillau were 17 more Soviet checkpoints, each one staffed by SMERSH officers with authority to detain and execute suspected hostiles. The refugees would never make it through 17 checkpoints alive, unless Solntsev gave them documents that would. January 19, 1945. 1100 hours. Solntsev sat in his office staring at a map of East Prussia marked with red circles. 17 checkpoints. 17 death traps. He needed forged authorization documents stamped with Colonel Kuznetsov's personal seal. Documents that would allow the refugees to pass through every checkpoint without question. It was treason. It was impossible. And he had less than 2 days to make it happen. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov entered. Petrov was 33 years old, former schoolteacher from Moscow. His brother had been executed for desertion in 1942. Petrov lived in constant fear of ending up the same way. He followed every order precisely, never asked questions, never took risks. Which was exactly why Solntsev could not ask him to do this. "You wanted to see me, Major." Solntsev gestured to the chair. "Sit down, Lieutenant. Close the door." Petrov closed the door and sat down. His hands were already shaking. "He is ready to refuse permission for treason." "Lieutenant, I need to ask you something. And before you answer, I need you to understand that your answer will determine whether you live or die. Do you understand?" Petrov went pale. "Major, I do not understand. I am going to commit treason, Lieutenant. I am going to forge military documents. I am going to undermine Soviet authority, and I am going to get myself executed for it. The question is whether you will help me, or whether you will report me to Captain Volkov right now." Petrov stared at him. Then he stood up. "Major, with all respect, I cannot do this. My brother was executed for far less than what you are describing. If I help you, I will be shot. I have a wife and 2 children in Moscow. I cannot leave them without a father. I am sorry, Major. I cannot help you." "Sit down, Lieutenant." Petrov remained standing. "I should leave, Major. I should report this conversation to Captain Volkov immediately. That is procedure. Sit down, Lieutenant. That is an order." Petrov hesitated. Then he sat down. His hands were shaking worse now. Solntsev opened his desk drawer and pulled out the photograph of his daughter. He handed it to Petrov. "This is Katya. She was 4 years old when she died in Leningrad. Starvation. The Germans surrounded the city, and let everyone inside starve to death, including my daughter. Do you understand what that means, Lieutenant? Petrov looked at the photograph. Yes, Major. I understand. Yesterday I intercepted a German refugee column. 2,000 people, mostly women and children. There was a 4-year-old boy in that column, the same age Katya was when she died. I let that column pass. I gave them transit papers. Captain Volkov has already reported my decision to Colonel Kuznetsov. I will be arrested within 48 hours. Do you understand what I am telling you, Lieutenant? You disobeyed orders to spare German civilians. Correct. And now those civilians are going to die anyway, because the transit papers I gave them are only valid for one checkpoint. They will be stopped at the next checkpoint, and the checkpoint after that. They will never reach Pillau alive, unless I forge documents that will allow them to pass through all 17 checkpoints between here and the coast. Do you understand now, Lieutenant? Petrov handed the photograph back. Major, I understand your intentions, but I cannot help you. I have a family. I cannot risk execution. Your brother was executed because he refused to follow an order that would have gotten his entire unit killed. He made a choice to save lives at the cost of his own. Was he a coward, Lieutenant? Or was he a hero? Petrov's face went hard. Do not use my brother against me, Major. That is not fair. You are right, Lieutenant. It is not fair. But 2,000 people are going to die if we do nothing. And your brother would have helped them. You know he would have. So I am asking you one more time. Will you help me forge these documents? Or will you let 2,000 people die because you are afraid? Petrov was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, What do you need me to do? I need you to help me steal an impression of Colonel Kuznetsov's personal seal. Then I need you to help me forge 17 sets of transit authorization documents. It will take approximately 8 hours. And when we are finished, we will both be guilty of treason punishable by death. Are you willing to take that risk? Petrov took a deep breath. If we are caught, you will tell them I had no choice. You will tell them you threatened to have me shot if I refused. You will protect my family. Can you promise me that, Major? I promise, Lieutenant. Your family will be protected. You have my word. Then I will help you, Major. God help us both. At 13:45 hours, Solntsev and Petrov positioned themselves near the communications office. Volkov filed his daily report with Colonel Kuznetsov at 1400 hours every day. The report went through the communications office for transmission. They had a 3-minute window to intercept it and make a wax impression of Kuznetsov's seal. Petrov was carrying a leather satchel containing a small block of dental wax. His hands were still shaking. At 13:58 hours, Volkov entered the communications building. He did not see Solntsev and Petrov in the hallway. He handed his report to the duty officer and left. Now. Solntsev walked into the communications office. The duty officer looked up. Major Solntsev. How can I help you? I need to review Captain Volkov's daily report before transmission. Security verification. The duty officer frowned. Major, I have never been asked to delay transmission for security verification. This is irregular. It is a direct order, Sergeant. Hand me the report. The duty officer hesitated. Then he picked up the report and handed it to Solntsev. Solntsev took it to the corner of the room. Petrov followed. At the bottom of the report was Colonel Kuznetsov's seal, stamped in red ink. Perfect and official. Petrov pulled out the dental wax. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The duty officer was watching them. Steady, Lieutenant, Solntsev whispered. Petrov pressed the wax against the seal. Held it. 3 seconds. 4 seconds. 5 seconds. The duty officer stood up. Major, is everything all right? Everything is fine, Sergeant. Just verifying classified operational details. 6 seconds. 7 seconds. Petrov lifted the wax. The impression was perfect, every detail captured. Solntsev handed the report back to the duty officer. Everything is in order, Sergeant. You may transmit as scheduled. The duty officer took the report and sat down. He was suspicious now, but Solntsev was a major and SMERSH. Nobody questioned SMERSH. They left the communications office and walked quickly back to Solntsev's quarters. Neither spoke until they were inside with the door closed. Petrov collapsed into a chair. "We almost got caught, Major. He was watching us. He knows something is wrong. He suspects something is irregular, but he does not know what. And by the time he reports it to anyone, we will be finished. Now we need to get this seal duplicated. Do you know anyone who can engrave bronze?" Petrov nodded. "Sergeant Ivan Karpov, armorer for the 184th Rifle Division. He was a jeweler before the war. If anyone can duplicate this seal, he can. Can we trust him?" "No, but we can pay him enough that he will not ask questions." At 15:30 hours, Solntsev and Petrov arrived at Sergeant Karpov's workshop. It was a converted barn on the outskirts of the division's staging area. Inside were workbenches covered with disassembled weapons and machine parts. Karpov was 52 years old. Thin, gray hair, scarred hands from years of metalwork. He looked up when they entered. "Major Solntsev, Lieutenant Petrov. What can I do for you?" Solntsev placed a leather pouch on the workbench. Inside was his personal stash of confiscated currency. German marks, Polish zloty. Enough to buy a year of silence. "Sergeant Karpov, I need you to create a duplicate of this seal." He handed Karpov the wax impression. "Perfect detail, bronze construction. I need it completed in 4 hours. Can you do it?" Karpov studied the impression. Then he looked at the money pouch. Then he looked at Solntsev. "This is Colonel Kuznetsov's personal seal. You are asking me to forge an official SMERSH authorization stamp. Do you understand what will happen to me if I am caught making this?" "Yes, Sergeant. You will be executed, just like Lieutenant Petrov and I will be executed when this operation is discovered. The question is whether you are willing to take that risk for more money than you will see in 10 years of military service." Karpov was silent. Then he picked up the money pouch and weighed it in his hand. 4 hours, you said. 4 hours. I will need complete privacy, no interruptions, and when this is finished, I never saw you. We never had this conversation. Agreed. Agreed. Karpov nodded. Come back at 19:30 hours. Your seal will be ready. Solntsev and Petrov left the workshop. They had 4 hours to wait, 4 hours to wonder if Karpov would report them to SMERSH, 4 hours to prepare for either success or execution. At 19:30 hours, they returned to Karpov's workshop. Karpov was waiting for them. On the workbench was a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside was a perfect bronze duplicate of Colonel Kuznetsov's seal. But there was a problem. Karpov had made 2 seals. The first seal was perfect, identical to the original in every detail. The second seal was slightly different. The engraving was too shallow. The letters were slightly misaligned. This one is perfect, Karpov said, pointing to the first seal. This one I made first. It took 3 attempts to get it right. These are the failures. He gestured to 2 more rejected seals on the workbench. You need to destroy these failures immediately. If anyone finds them, we are all dead. Solntsev picked up the failed seals. Why did you show these to us, Sergeant? You could have destroyed them yourself. Karpov looked at him. Because I want you to understand something major. I have created a perfect forgery of an official SMERSH seal. That makes me complicit in whatever you are planning to do with it. If this operation fails and you are caught, I will be executed alongside you. So I need you to tell me right now, is whatever you are planning worth dying for? Solntsev met his eyes. Yes, Sergeant, it is. Karpov nodded. Then do not get caught, Major, because if you do, I am taking as many SMERSH bastards with me as I can before they put me against the wall. He handed Solntsev the perfect seal. Good luck, Major. You are going to need it. For the next 6 hours, Solntsev and Petrov worked without stopping. They forged 17 sets of transit authorization documents. Each document was stamped with the duplicate seal. Each document was backdated to look authentic. Each document authorized passage through specific checkpoints by name. By 0200 hours on January 20th, the forgeries were complete. Now they had to deliver them. At 0230 hours, Solntsev and Petrov drove west in a single truck. No headlights, following the frozen road by moonlight. They drove for 90 minutes through abandoned villages and past frozen corpses. At 0400 hours, they saw the refugee column sleeping on the side of the road. But there was a problem. Another SMERSH unit was already there. 3 Soviet trucks were parked across the road. 10 SMERSH officers were moving through the sleeping refugees, checking documents, interrogating people, looking for reasons to execute them. Solntsev stopped his truck 200 meters away and turned off the engine. "What do we do, Major?" Petrov whispered. "We deliver the documents, as planned. But there are 10 SMERSH officers between us and the column. They will demand to know why we are here. They will discover the forged documents. We will be arrested. Then we will have to convince them we have authority to be here." "How?" Solntsev pulled out his service pistol and checked the ammunition. "By being more frightening than they are." They walked toward the SMERSH checkpoint. One of the officers saw them approaching and raised his weapon. "Halt! Identify yourselves. Major Alexander Solntsev, SMERSH Counterintelligence, 2nd Belarusian Front. I am here on direct orders from Colonel Dmitry Kuznetsov to conduct security verification of this refugee column." The officer lowered his weapon slightly. "We are already conducting security verification, Major. This is our assigned sector. Your verification is incomplete. Colonel Kuznetsov has intelligence suggesting this column contains high-value intelligence targets. I am here to conduct enhanced interrogation protocols. You will cease your current operations and withdraw immediately." The officer looked confused. "Major, I have received no notification of enhanced protocols. This is irregular." Solntsev walked directly up to him. "Are you questioning the authority of Colonel Kuznetsov, Captain?" "No, Major, but I am required to verify unusual operational changes before complying." Solntsev pulled out the forged authorization document and showed it to the officer. "Here is your verification, Captain, signed by Colonel Kuznetsov himself. Enhanced interrogation protocols. Priority Alpha. Immediate compliance required. Now withdraw your men, or I will file an obstruction report that will have you transferred to a punishment battalion by tomorrow morning. Do you understand?" The officer looked at the document, looked at the seal, looked at Solntsev. Then he saluted. "Yes, Major. Understood." He turned to his men. "Pack up. We are withdrawing. New orders." The SMERSH unit loaded into their trucks and drove away. Petrov was shaking. "That was insane, Major. If he had questioned that document, we would be under arrest right now." But he did not question it, Lieutenant. Fear is more powerful than procedure. Remember that. They walked to the sleeping column. Franz Dietrich was sitting on a crate keeping watch. When he saw the Soviet uniforms, he stood up quickly. Solntsev held up his hand. "Calm down, Herr Dietrich. We are here to help." He pulled the courier pouch from his coat. Inside were the 17 sets of forged documents. "These will allow your column to pass through every Soviet checkpoint between here and Pillau. You will not be stopped. You will not be questioned. You will reach the evacuation ships safely." Dietrich took the pouch with shaking hands. He opened it and looked at the documents. His eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Solntsev thought about Katya, about the 4-year-old boy sleeping in the column, about everything that had been lost and everything that could still be saved, because someone has to stop the killing. Then Solntsev saw her. A woman in a nurse's uniform was sleeping 20 meters away. She had a medical bag beside her, a Red Cross armband. She was in her late 20s. blonde hair, exhausted face. "That is Greta Mueller," Dietrich said quietly. "She is a nurse from Königsberg. She has been treating wounded civilians in the column, saving lives even now." Solntsev walked over to where Greta was sleeping. He knelt down and left one set of the forged documents beside her medical bag. Then he wrote a note and placed it on top of the documents. The note said, "Remember this name, Major Alexander Solntsev, SMERSH, 2nd Belarusian Front. If anyone ever asks what happened here, tell them the truth." He stood up and walked back to Dietrich. "Get your people to Pillau. Do not stop for anything, and make sure Greta Mueller keeps those documents. Someday they may be the only proof that this ever happened. I will, Major. I promise." Solntsev and Petrov walked back to their truck and drove away. Neither spoke. They both understood what they had just done. They had committed treason. They had forged military documents. They had intimidated fellow SMERSH officers. They had saved 2,000 lives. And now they were going to die for it. At 0600 hours they returned to headquarters. Solntsev went to his office and sat at his desk. The photograph of Katya was still in the drawer. He pulled it out and looked at it one more time. The clock on the wall said, 0615 hours. At 0947 hours there was a knock at the door. "Come in." Captain Volkov entered, but he was not alone. Behind him were two SMERSH investigators, and behind them was Colonel Dmitry Kuznetsov himself. Kuznetsov was 50 years old, cold eyes, gray uniform covered in medals. He had personally overseen 300 executions. He looked at Solntsev the way a butcher looks at cattle. "Major Alexander Solntsev, you are under arrest for treason, forgery of official documents, and undermining Soviet military authority. You will be tried by military tribunal. The penalty for these crimes is death by firing squad. Do you have anything to say?" Solntsev stood up slowly. He looked at Volkov. Volkov was smiling. Then Solntsev looked at Kuznetsov. "I have nothing to say, Colonel, except that I would do it again." Kuznetsov nodded to the investigators. "Take him." The investigators moved forward with handcuffs, and then Lieutenant Petrov entered the office. He was holding a pistol. Everyone froze. "Major Solntsev," Petrov said quietly, "I cannot let them arrest you. Not after what we did. Not after what we saved." Volkov reached for his weapon. Petrov fired. The shot missed Volkov by centimeters and hit the wall behind him. Petrov turned the gun toward Kuznetsov. "If anyone moves, I will shoot the colonel." Kuznetsov did not move. He looked at Petrov with cold calculation. "Lieutenant Petrov, if you shoot me, you will be dead within seconds. Is that really what you want?" Petrov was crying now. "No, Colonel. That is not what I want, but I cannot let you execute Major Solntsev. He saved 2,000 lives. He is a hero, and you are going to kill him for it." Kuznetsov smiled. "A hero. Is that what you think he is, Lieutenant? He is a traitor, and so are you." Petrov kept the gun pointed at Kuznetsov. "Major, run. Get out of here. I will hold them off as long as I can." Solntsev looked at Petrov. Then he looked at the window. He could jump through it. He could run. He could desert. He might survive. But Petrov would die, and it would accomplish nothing. "Lower your weapon, Lieutenant," Solntsev said quietly. "That is an order. But, Major, they will kill you." "I know. Lower your weapon." Petrov hesitated. Then he lowered the gun. The investigators rushed forward and tackled him. They dragged him to the floor and handcuffed him. Kuznetsov looked at Solntsev. "You have just witnessed your accomplice confess to treason, Major. This makes your trial very simple. You will both be executed within 72 hours. Do you understand?" Solntsev nodded. "I understand, Colonel." "Good. Take them both." The investigators pulled Solntsev and Petrov out of the office in handcuffs. As they were dragged down the hallway, Solntsev looked back one more time. Volkov was standing in the doorway. still smiling. And somewhere west of here, 2,000 refugees were walking toward Pillau, carrying forged documents, passing through Soviet checkpoints, moving closer to survival with every step. The countdown was over. The arrest had happened. In 72 hours, Major Alexander Solntsev would be dead. But 2,000 people would be alive, and Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov would die beside him, a hero who chose mercy over survival. 72 hours to live. That was what the military tribunal gave them. Major Alexander Solntsev and Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov, both found guilty of treason, forgery, and undermining Soviet military authority. Both sentenced to death by firing squad. Execution scheduled for January 23, 1945, 0600 hours, 3 days to die. January 20th, 1945, 1200 hours. Solntsev sat in a detention cell at divisional headquarters. The cell was 3 meters by 2 meters. Stone walls, no windows, one steel door with a viewing slot, a wooden bench, a bucket, nothing else. Petrov was in the cell next to his. Solntsev could hear him crying through the wall. The tribunal had lasted 40 minutes. Colonel Kuznetsov presented evidence: the stolen seal impression, the forged documents, testimony from Captain Volkov, testimony from the communications duty officer who had witnessed the theft, testimony from Sergeant Karpov, who had been arrested 2 hours after Solntsev. Karpov had confessed immediately. He told them everything: how Solntsev had paid him to create a duplicate seal, how he had made multiple attempts before succeeding, how he had warned Solntsev not to get caught. Then he had begged for mercy, pleaded for his life, promised to provide more information if they spared him. They shot him in the courtyard while the tribunal was still in session. Solntsev heard the gunfire through the walls. 9 shots. It should have been 1. But the firing squad was drunk and their aim was poor. It took 9 shots to kill Sergeant Ivan Karpov. That was how Solntsev would die, standing against a wall while drunk soldiers fired bullets into his body until he stopped moving. 3 days from now. The viewing slot in the door opened. Captain Volkov looked through. "Comfortable, Major." Solntsev did not answer. "I wanted to thank you personally," Volkov said. "Your treason has earned me a promotion. I am now Senior Captain Volkov, Chief of Regional SMERSH Operations. Colonel Kuznetsov is very pleased with my work. He says I demonstrated exceptional vigilance in detecting and reporting your crimes. I will receive a medal at the same ceremony where you receive a bullet. Is that not ironic, Major?" Solntsev looked at Volkov. "The 2,000 Germans I saved are boarding ships at Pillau right now. They are alive because I chose mercy over obedience. What will you be remembered for, Captain?" Volkov smiled. "I will be remembered as a loyal Soviet officer who stopped a traitor." "You will be remembered as nothing, because after you are executed, your name will be erased from all military records. Your family will be told you died in combat. Your awards will be revoked. Your service will be forgotten. You will cease to exist, Major. That is the punishment for treason." Solntsev stood up and walked to the door. "Then tell me, Captain, do you sleep well at night?" Volkov's smile faded. "I sleep perfectly, Major, because I know I did my duty." "Then you are a better liar than I thought." Volkov closed the viewing slot. Solntsev sat back down on the bench. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes. Every minute bringing him closer to the wall, closer to the firing squad, closer to 9 bullets ripping through his chest while Volkov watched and smiled. But 2,000 Germans were alive. That had to be enough. The door opened. Colonel Kuznetsov entered. 2 guards followed him. They remained by the door. "Major Solntsev, I wanted to speak with you privately before your execution." Solntsev did not stand. "What do you want, Colonel?" Kuznetsov pulled a chair from the corner and sat down. He looked at Solntsev the way a scientist looks at an interesting specimen. "I want to understand something, Major. You had a distinguished service record. 47 investigations, 38 successful executions. You were known as the Ghost of SMERSH, ruthless, efficient, loyal. And then in one day you threw it all away to save 2,000 German civilians. Why? Because they were human beings. Kuznetsov nodded. That is what I expected you to say. But that is not an answer, Major. You knew those German civilians would die at the next checkpoint, even if you let them pass the first one. You knew your transit papers were temporary. You knew they needed forged documents to survive. So you made a choice. You decided to commit treason, to steal military seals, to forge official documents, to risk your life. For Germans. For the enemy. Why? Solntsev met his eyes. Because I am not you, Colonel. Kuznetsov smiled. No, Major, you are not. I would never have made your mistake. Do you want to know why? Tell me. Because mercy is weakness. Compassion is failure. Humanity is vulnerability. You saved 2,000 Germans and condemned yourself to death. I have executed 300 people and earned promotions and medals. Your way leads to execution. My way leads to power. So tell me, Major, who made the correct choice? You will die someday, Colonel, and when you do, nobody will remember your name. But those 2,000 Germans will remember mine. Their children will remember mine. Their grandchildren will remember mine. So yes, Colonel, I made the correct choice. Kuznetsov stood up. You are wrong, Major. Those Germans will forget you within a year. Gratitude fades. Memory fails. Nobody remembers mercy. But everyone remembers power. And I have power. You have 72 hours. He walked to the door, then he stopped and looked back. One more thing, Major. The refugee column you saved. They never reached Pillau. Solntsev felt his heart stop. What? The forged documents you created were identified as counterfeits at Checkpoint 9. The entire column was detained. 2,143 German civilians. All arrested, all interrogated, all executed for attempting to use forged Soviet military documents. It happened yesterday, while you were in tribunal. I received the report this morning. Solntsev stood up slowly. You are lying. I am not lying, Major. I have the execution report right here. He pulled a document from his coat. Checkpoint 9, 17 kilometers west of Heiligenbeil, January 19th, 1945, 1400 hours. Mass execution of German civilians attempting to pass through Soviet lines using forged authorization documents. 2,143 confirmed dead. He handed the document to Solntsev. You can read it yourself, Major. Solntsev took the document. His hands were shaking. He read it. Every word, every number, every signature. It was real. The checkpoint commander had signed it. The date was correct. The location was correct. The number of dead matched exactly. 2,143. They were all dead. Every person Solntsev had tried to save. Every woman, every child. The 4-year-old boy. The nurse Greta Muller. Franz Dietrich. Everyone. All dead. Because Solntsev's forged documents had not been good enough. Because the seal Karpov had created was slightly imperfect. Because SMERSH checkpoints examined every document with microscopic precision. Because mercy was not enough. Because trying to save them had killed them. Solntsev dropped the document. He sat down on the bench. He could not breathe, could not think, could not process what he had just learned. 2,000 people dead. Because of him. Kuznetsov picked up the document. So you see, Major, your treason accomplished nothing. Those Germans died anyway. You sacrificed your life for nothing. You committed crimes for nothing. You betrayed your country for nothing. Was it worth it, Major? Solntsev could not answer. Kuznetsov walked to the door. 72 hours, Major. I suggest you spend it thinking about your mistakes. He left. The guards closed the door behind him. Solntsev sat alone in the cell. The execution report lay on the floor in front of him. 2,143 confirmed dead. He had killed them. He had tried to save them. And he had killed them. If he had followed orders and liquidated them at the first checkpoint, they would have died quickly. 1 bullet each. Clean. Efficient. But instead he had given them hope. He had made them believe they could escape. He had forged documents that had led them straight to their deaths. And they had died slowly. Interrogated. Tortured. Executed for attempting to use forged papers. He had made it worse. Through the wall, he heard Petrov screaming. Petrov had heard Kuznetsov. Petrov knew. They had both sacrificed their lives for nothing. 2,000 Germans dead. 2 Soviet officers scheduled for execution. 4 people destroyed by mercy. Solntsev pulled the photograph of Katya from his pocket. The guards had let him keep it. A final mercy before execution. He looked at her face. 4 years old, smiling, holding her doll, dead in Leningrad. He had thought saving the 4-year-old German boy would honor her memory. But instead, he had killed him. The boy was dead now, just like Katya. Both dead because adults had made terrible choices. Katya because Germans had besieged Leningrad. The boy because Solntsev had tried to save him. Mercy had solved nothing. Solntsev lay down on the bench and closed his eyes. 3 days until execution. 3 days until he would stand against a wall and feel 9 bullets tear through his body. 3 days until he ceased to exist. It did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered anymore. 2,000 people dead. His sacrifice meaningless. His treason pointless. His life wasted. January 21st, 1945. 0200 hours. Solntsev was awakened by the sound of the door opening. He sat up quickly. 2 guards stood in the doorway, but they were not looking at him. They were looking behind them, nervous, checking the corridor. One of the guards spoke quietly. Major Solntsev, you have a visitor. You have 3 minutes. If anyone discovers this, we will all be executed. Do you understand? Solntsev stood up. Who? The guard stepped aside. A woman entered the cell. She was wearing a Soviet uniform, Medical Corps insignia. But her face was German, late 20s, blonde hair hidden under a military cap, exhausted eyes. She pulled off the cap. Greta Muller. Solntsev stared at her. You are alive. The guard closed the door but did not lock it. Through the viewing slot, Solntsev could see him standing watch in the corridor. Greta stepped forward quickly. We have 3 minutes, Major. Listen carefully. Colonel Kuznetsov lied to you. There was no execution at Checkpoint 9. Your documents worked perfectly. All 2,143 people in our column reached Pillau safely. We boarded evacuation ships on January 20th at 0800 hours. We are alive, Major, all of us, because of you. But the report, Solntsev said, Kuznetsov showed me, signed by the checkpoint commander, 2,000 dead. The report was fabricated, Major. Kuznetsov wanted you to die believing you had failed. He wanted to break you before the execution. But he lied. We are alive. How are you here? Solntsev whispered. This is a SMERSH detention facility. They would never allow a German civilian inside. I am not here as a German civilian, Major. I am here because Lieutenant Petrov arranged it before he was arrested. Petrov. Greta nodded. 3 years ago, you investigated a supply officer named Sergeant Yuri Morozov. He was accused of stealing food from military stores and selling it on the black market. The penalty was execution. But you discovered that Morozov was not stealing. He was giving food to starving civilians in a nearby village. Civilians who would have died without that food. You falsified your investigation report. You declared Morozov innocent. You saved his life. Solntsev remembered. Morozov had 3 children, a wife. He was trying to feed people who had nothing. Executing him would have been murder. Morozov never forgot what you did, Major. He was transferred to detention facility security 2 years ago. When Lieutenant Petrov was arrested, he found Morozov. He told him what you had done, saving 2,000 German civilians, forging documents, choosing mercy. Petrov told Morozov that a German nurse named Greta Muller had evidence that you had succeeded, that we were alive, that your sacrifice had meaning. He asked Morozov to help get that evidence to you before you were executed, and Morozov agreed. Morozov owed you his life, Major. He said the debt must be repaid, so he arranged this. He obtained a Soviet medical uniform for me. He smuggled me into the facility, disguised as a military nurse conducting prisoner health inspections. He is standing guard outside right now. If we are discovered, he will be executed immediately. We have 3 minutes. After that, I must leave, or we will all die. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded paper. This is a letter signed by everyone in our column. All 2,143 people you saved. Every name, every signature. We wrote it together on the evacuation ship. It took us 8 hours. We wanted you to know, Major. We wanted you to understand before you died. You are not a traitor. You are a hero, and we will never forget your name. She handed him the letter. Solntsev unfolded it with shaking hands. It was covered in signatures, hundreds of them, filling every space on the page. Names in German, thank you messages, blessings, prayers. At the bottom in large letters, Major Alexander Solntsev, the man who chose mercy over orders. We will never forget. 2 minutes, Major, the guard whispered through the door. Greta continued quickly. My family is alive because of you. My sister has 3 daughters. My brother has 2 sons. They are all safe now. They will grow up in Germany. They will have families of their own someday. Hundreds of lives will exist in the future because you made one choice on one cold morning in January. That is not treason, Major. That is grace. She looked at the door, then back at Solntsev. You will die tomorrow, Major. I cannot stop it, but I needed you to know before the end. Everything you did mattered. Every document you forged mattered. Every risk you took mattered. 2,000 people are alive because of your mercy, and we will tell our children about you, and our children will tell their children. Your name will live forever, Major Solntsev, not in Soviet records, but in our blood, in our families, in our memories. You saved us, and we will never let the world forget. The guard opened the door slightly. Time is up. You must leave now. Greta walked to the door, then she stopped and looked back one final time. The 4-year-old boy you saved. His name is Klaus. I am taking care of him now. His mother died before the evacuation, but Klaus is alive, and when he is old enough to understand, I will tell him about you, about the Soviet officer who could have killed him but chose to save him instead, about Major Alexander Solntsev, the ghost who became human. Then she put the medical cap back on and left the cell. The guard closed the door and locked it. Solntsev stood alone holding the letter. 2,000 signatures, 2,000 lives, 2,000 people who would remember his name. Kuznetsov had lied. The refugees had survived. The forged documents had worked. Mercy had succeeded. And in less than 30 hours he would die, knowing that everything he had sacrificed had been worth it. He sat down on the bench and read every signature on the letter, every name, every message. It took him 20 minutes. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket next to the photograph of Katya. Then he knocked on the wall. 3 times. The signal. Petrov. Petrov knocked back. 4 times. I am here. Solntsev spoke quietly. Petrov, can you hear me? Yes, Major. I can hear you. Greta was here. She told me what you did, how you contacted Morozov, how you arranged her visit. You did that knowing it could have gotten you executed immediately if you were discovered. Why? Because you needed to know the truth, Major. You needed to know that we succeeded, that 2,000 people are alive. You could not die believing we had failed. Petrov's voice broke. You saved my life 3 years ago, Major. When my brother was executed, you could have investigated me next. You could have found reasons to arrest me, but you left me alone. You let me survive. Now I have repaid that debt. You will die knowing you succeeded. That has to be enough." "It is enough, Lieutenant." "Thank you." Petrov knocked 3 times. "Brothers in mercy, Major. Brothers in mercy, Lieutenant. January 23rd, 1945. 0600 hours. Major Alexander Solntsev and Lieutenant Dmitry Petrov stood against the wall in the courtyard. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Blindfolds were offered. Both refused. The firing squad assembled. 10 soldiers. All sober this time. Colonel Kuznetsov had ordered perfect execution. No 9 shots like Karpov. Clean and efficient. 1 volley, instant death. Captain Volkov stood beside Kuznetsov watching. He was wearing his new senior captain insignia. He was smiling. Kuznetsov raised his hand. "Ready." The soldiers raised their rifles. "Aim." The soldiers sighted their targets. Solntsev looked at Petrov. Petrov looked back. They nodded to each other. Brothers in mercy, partners in treason. Heroes who chose humanity over orders. In Solntsev's pocket was the letter. 2,000 signatures, 2,000 lives, 2,000 people who would remember. Kuznetsov's hand dropped. Fire. 10 rifles fired as one. Perfect synchronization. 20 bullets crossed the courtyard in less than a second. 10 struck Solntsev. 10 struck Petrov. Both men fell. Neither made a sound. Captain Volkov walked forward to verify death. He looked down at Solntsev's body. Blood spreading across the gray uniform, eyes still open, staring at nothing. Volkov smiled. Finally, the traitor was dead. But he was wrong, because in Pillau Harbor, 2,143 people were boarding ships, and every one of them carried Major Alexander Solntsev's name in their hearts. And every one of them would tell their children, and their children would tell their children. Sergeant Yuri Morozov stood in the shadows watching the execution. He had risked his life to bring Greta to Solntsev. He had repaid his debt. Now he had one more task. That night Morozov removed the letter from Solntsev's body before it was burned. He kept it hidden for 43 years. And when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, he published it. The letter appeared in German newspapers. It appeared in history books. It appeared in documentary films. 2,000 signatures. 2,000 testimonies. Proof that one Soviet officer had chosen mercy over orders. Proof that Major Alexander Solntsev had saved lives instead of taking them. Volkov died in 1973. Nobody remembered him. Kuznetsov died in 1982. Nobody remembered him either. But Solntsev's name lived forever. In Germany, there is a memorial, a stone wall with 2,143 names engraved on it. At the top, in large letters, the people saved by Major Alexander Solntsev, January 1945. He chose mercy. Every year on January 23rd, descendants of those refugees visit the memorial. They place flowers. They say prayers. They remember. Klaus grew up in Germany. He became a doctor. He named his son Alexander. His grandson is named Alexander too. The name will continue. The memory will continue. The story will never end. Because mercy never dies, even when the merciful do. Major Alexander Solntsev's body was executed on January 23, 1945. But his name will live forever. In 2018, Klaus Weber died at age 77. 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren, all of them exist because in 1945 a Soviet officer chose mercy. Now here's my question for you. How do you want to be remembered? For following the rules? Or for choosing humanity? Write in the comments. What choice have you made in your life that changed someone's fate? Even small choices matter. I want to hear your story. And if you want more people to think about their legacy, hit the like button. Because this isn't just a story. It's a reminder that every one of us leaves a mark.